The woman at the registration desk did not look up when Abina walked in. That was the first thing. Not the polished marble floors of the Meridian Grand, not the chandeliers that scattered light across the ceiling, like something someone had designed specifically to remind you of your place in the world. It was the woman at the registration desk, late 20s, dark blazer, hair pulled back in a way that communicated efficiency without warmth, who did not look up. Abena set her carry-on beside the desk and waited. The woman typed something, clicked her mouse, typed again. Abena Darko Williams had flown in from Vancouver that morning, on her own plane, a Bombardier Global 7500, that she had purchased 2 years prior and named, quietly and without telling anyone, after her grandmother. She had spent the 4-hour flight reading acquisition proposals and eating jerk chicken that her personal chef had packed in reusable containers because she was still, at 43, the kind of woman who thought about single-use plastic. She had landed at Pearson, been driven to the Meridian Grand in a car she did not own and did not care about, and walked through the front doors of one of Toronto's most expensive hotels wearing dark jeans, a cream-colored linen blazer, and the kind of comfortable sneakers that people assumed meant you could not afford better. She could afford better. She simply did not need it. "Excuse me," Abina said. The woman looked up then. Her eyes moved from Abina's face to her blazer, to her sneakers and back up again, and something shifted in her expression, not rudeness exactly, but the quiet recalibration of someone deciding, in less than 2 seconds, where another person belonged. "Do you have a reservation?" the woman asked. "I do," Abina said. "Darko Williams. 2 nights, more typing." A pause that lasted slightly longer than necessary. "I'm not seeing it," the woman said. Abina had been in rooms like this her whole adult life. Rooms where someone looked at her and did not see what was actually there. She had learned over many years in many rooms not to fill those silences with anxiety. She let it sit. "Try under Vertex Capital," she said. "My assistant may have booked it under the corporate account." Another pause. The woman's expression did not change, but her posture did. A subtle stiffening, the kind that happened when a person realized they were possibly speaking to someone they had not correctly identified. The reservation appeared. The penthouse suite, 3 nights paid in full, flagged with the hotel's internal notation for guests who were not to be kept waiting. The woman looked at the screen for a moment. She did not apologize. "I'll have someone bring your bag up," she said, and her voice had shifted slightly, the edges of it smoother now, and Abena noticed that too. The way courtesy appeared when it was useful, and disappeared when it wasn't. And she said nothing about it because she had learned that some battles cost more than they were worth, and some cost exactly what they appeared to. She was still deciding which kind this was. The Meridian Grand's annual charity gala was the kind of event that Toronto's financial community treated as obligatory in the same way they treated dental appointments. Necessary, slightly uncomfortable, and best endured with an open bar. It raised money for children's literacy programs across Ontario, which was genuinely good, and it also served as the primary social event of the autumn season for anyone with a net worth above a certain number, which was considerably less good, though no one said so out loud. Abina had been invited 3 years in a row. She had attended twice, skipped once, when a funding round required her full attention, and donated the same amount regardless of attendance, because the children's literacy programs were real, and the open bar was not why she wrote checks. This year, she had agreed to be a keynote speaker. Her communications director, a sharp woman named Petra, who had worked with her for 6 years, had negotiated the speaking slot and sent Abina a briefing document that ran to 11 pages. Abina had read 4 of them on the plane. The event was 3 days away. Tonight was a pre-gala reception for sponsors and major donors, smaller, more intimate, the kind of gathering where the real conversations happened before the official ones. Abina arrived at 7:20 in the dress she had bought in Paris the previous spring, navy silk, architectural in the shoulders. The kind of garment that was quiet until it was in a room and then was not quiet at all. She wore no jewelry except her grandmother's ring, a thin gold band with a small opal that had no resale value and was worth more to her than everything else she owned. The reception was held in the Meridian Grand's Lakeview room, which had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Ontario. The water was dark at this hour, lit from below by the city's reflection, and it looked expensive in the way that natural things sometimes did when they were framed correctly. There were perhaps 60 people in the room. Abina recognized several of them. Board members, fund managers, a senator she had met at a conference in Ottawa, a tech executive whose company had recently made a poor acquisition decision she had been advising against for 18 months. She took a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and moved through the room with the ease of someone who had been doing this long enough that it no longer required effort. She was standing near the windows, speaking with a woman who ran a foundation out of Calgary, when she heard the voice behind her. Someone let the help in through the wrong door. It was not whispered. It was said at a volume calibrated to be heard by the people immediately surrounding it. Loud enough to land, quiet enough to be plausibly accidental. The kind of volume that people used when they wanted an audience but did not want accountability. Abina turned. The man who had spoken was perhaps 60, silver-haired, the kind of tan that came from spending winters somewhere warm without having earned the leisure. He was standing with a woman of similar age, his wife, by the body language, and another couple, all four of them in the particular uniform of old Toronto money. Bespoke but not flashy, the sort of clothes that communicated that the wearer had never once had to think about what things cost. His name, Abina would learn later, was Randall Pemberton Cross. He sat on the boards of 3 banks and 2 hospitals, and had a building at his alma mater named after his grandfather. His wife was laughing, a small, controlled laugh, the kind that women in those circles had perfected, which communicated amusement without commitment. The woman from Calgary had gone still. Abina looked at Randall Pemberton Cross for a moment. He met her eyes with the particular confidence of a man who had never been wrong in a room and had no evidence that this would be the first time. "I'm sorry," Abina said pleasantly. "Did you mean me?" Something flickered across his face, not guilt, more like the mild irritation of someone who had not expected a response. "I was speaking to my wife," he said. "You were speaking loudly enough for the room," Abina said, "so I assumed you wanted the room to hear." A silence. Not an empty silence. A loaded one, the kind that rooms got when something had shifted and no one was sure yet what it meant. Randall Pemberton Cross looked at her, really looked, in the way he clearly had not done before, and his expression moved through several small adjustments before settling somewhere dismissive. "I don't know who you are," he said, "but this event is for donors and partners of the Literacy Initiative. I've been a patron for 15 years. He paused. "Perhaps there's been some confusion about the guest list." He said it the way people said things when they wanted you to leave without technically asking you to go. It was a skill that required practice and a lifetime of being in rooms where you decided who stayed. Abina took a sip of her sparkling water. "There's no confusion," she said. "I'm Abina Darko-Williams. I'm the keynote speaker for Thursday's Gala and the lead donor for this year's campaign." She paused. Verkant Capital committed $3 million to the Children's Literacy Initiative in August. I believe I was the largest single donor this cycle. The room had gone quiet in the way that rooms did when the conversation at its center became the only conversation worth hearing. Randall Pemberton Cross said nothing. His wife's smile had not changed position, but had changed quality entirely. It was now the smile of someone trying to determine how quickly they could be somewhere else. "So," Abina said, and her voice was still pleasant, still entirely level. "Is there anything else you'd like to clarify about the guest list?" She did not wait for his answer. Not because she was flustered. She was not flustered, had not been flustered since she was 26, and had learned, in a boardroom in London, that flustered was a luxury she could not afford. She walked away because she had said what needed to be said, and staying would only have given him space to recover. And she was not in the business of giving that particular kind of space. The woman from Calgary fell into step beside her. That was, The woman from Calgary said, and then paused, and then said, "Remarkable." Abena smiled. It was a Tuesday. She found a quieter corner of the room and stood for a moment, looking out at the lake. Her grandmother used to say that water was the oldest listener, that it had heard everything and forgotten nothing and would still be there long after the people on its shores had gone. Abena did not know if she believed in that kind of thing, but she found that standing near large bodies of water had a clarifying effect, and she was grateful for it now. Behind her, she could hear the room reorganizing itself around what had just happened. The particular hum of 60 people quietly recalibrating. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus Owusu, her chief of staff. Not one of the names in the file, a man she had hired 8 years ago from a policy role in Ottawa because he had the sharpest institutional memory she had ever encountered and the rare quality of knowing when not to speak. Heard there was an incident at the reception. "Everything okay?" She typed back. "Fine. Nothing I haven't handled." A pause. Then, "The Pemberton Cross family are on the guest list for Thursday. Randall is on the Gala committee." She had suspected as much. Men like Randall Pemberton Cross did not merely attend these things. They organized them, sat on the committees, ensured that their names appeared in the right places in the program. It was how they maintained the sense that the rooms belonged to them. She typed, "I know. Leave it." She put the phone back in her clutch and stood there a moment longer, watching the lake. She was thinking about her mother. Specifically, she was thinking about a night when she was 11 years old, in Brampton, in the apartment on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled like the cooking of 6 different families, and her mother had come home from the hospital where she worked as a nursing aide, had set her shoes by the door with the care of someone who owned only one good pair, and had sat at the kitchen table and said nothing for a long time. Abena had made tea the way her grandmother had taught her and set it in front of her mother and waited. Eventually her mother had said, "There will always be people who look at you and see what they expect. Your job is not to convince them. Your job is to know what you are and not require their agreement." Abena had been 11. She had not fully understood it then. She understood it now. The next 2 days moved with the particular tempo of preparation. Meetings, briefings, the careful architecture of a major public event. Abena reviewed her keynote address 3 times and changed the opening twice, because the first version was too polished, and the second was too raw, and the third landed somewhere that felt true. She did a walkthrough of the stage with the event team. She spoke to the Literacy Foundation's executive director, a woman named Constance, who had been running the organization for 22 years with the particular tenacity of someone who believed completely in the work and had learned to do it without adequate resources. She did not think about Randall Pemberton Cross, or rather, she thought about him in the way she thought about other structural problems, acknowledged the thing, assessed its dimensions, set it aside until it was relevant. It became relevant on Thursday afternoon. She was in the hotel's business center, reviewing her remarks, when Marcus appeared in the doorway, with the expression he used when something required her attention, but was not an emergency. "The Gala committee met this morning," he said. "Pemberton Cross moved a motion to have your speaking slot reassigned." Abena looked up from her papers. "On what grounds?" she asked. "He said there had been a misunderstanding at the reception, and that you had behaved in a way that was inappropriate for the tone of the event." She set down her pen. "He said that." "He did. The motion didn't pass. The Foundation's executive director, Constance. She apparently made it quite clear that you were not being removed from the program, and reminded the committee that your donation represented 30% of this year's campaign total." Marcus paused. She also said, and I'm quoting here, that she had not spent 22 years building this organization to watch it make decisions based on who made whom uncomfortable at a cocktail party. Abena was quiet for a moment. "I'd like to send Constance flowers," she said. "Already done," Marcus said. "Pink peonies. I remembered she mentioned them once." She picked up her pen. "Is there anything I need to do before tonight?" she asked. "No," Marcus said. but you should know that Randall Pemberton Cross will be at the gala. Front table. I know, Abena said. She looked down at her opening lines. She read them once more, and then she changed one word, a small word, an almost invisible change, and the sentence became what it had been trying to be. Good, she said, and meant something slightly larger than the word itself. The Meridian Grand's ballroom held 400 people comfortably, and 500 on a night when the cause was right and the room had been lit well. On Thursday evening it held 437, and it had been lit very well indeed. Warm gold overhead. The tables dressed in white and deep green, the stage at the far end of the room flanked by screens showing photographs of children in classrooms across Ontario, reading. Abena sat at the head table through 3 speeches and a video presentation and a live auction that raised an amount that made Constance press her hands together and look at the ceiling. She ate the salmon without complaint because it was adequate, and the cause was not the salmon. She spoke with the people on either side of her and watched the room and did not look at the front table, because she was not giving Randall Pemberton Cross the attention of being watched. When the MC introduced her name, her company, the scope of the donation, the keynote, she heard the sound of the room doing what rooms did when they realized they had underestimated something. Not a gasp. More like a recalibration, a collective adjustment. She walked to the stage. The lights on the audience dimmed slightly when she reached the podium. She could see the first few tables clearly. Constance in the front row, sitting with the foundation staff. The senator from Ottawa, the woman from Calgary, who had been with her at the reception. And at the far left, the front table, Randall Pemberton Cross, his wife, 2 other couples in the particular uniform of people who had purchased their seats at the top table and expected the room to acknowledge it. Randall Pemberton Cross was not looking at her. She found this interesting. She adjusted the microphone. She let the room settle. She had learned, over years of addresses, that the pause before you spoke was not dead air. It was the moment when an audience decided whether to lean in or lean back. She had learned how to use it. Then she began. My mother came to Canada from Ghana in 1978 with $80, 2 suitcases, and a nursing certificate that it would take her 3 years to have recognized here. She cleaned office buildings for those 3 years while she went through the recertification process. She worked nights. She studied mornings. She raised me in between in a 3rd-floor apartment in Brampton that I thought was perfectly normal until I was old enough to understand what it had cost her to keep it. She paused. She read to me every night. Not because she had time. She didn't have time. But because she believed, in the particular way that immigrant mothers believe in things, that a child who could read well could go anywhere. Another pause. The room was very still. I started Vertex Capital in 2009 with $40,000 and a business plan that 17 investors told me was too ambitious. Vertex now manages assets of approximately $12 billion across 4 countries. She said it plainly, without performance. I tell you this, not because the number is impressive. Numbers are just numbers, but because the reason Vertex exists is the same reason my mother read to me every night. She believed that access to language was access to everything else, and she was right. She looked out at the room. The children who benefit from this foundation's work are not statistics. They're kids in classrooms in Thunder Bay and Windsor and North York and Sudbury who have teachers trying to reach them with not enough books and not enough time. They're kids who might one day sit in a room like this, or might not, and whether they do or not should depend on nothing except what they're willing to work for. She paused. It should not depend on who looked at them when they walked in the door and decided what they were allowed to be. The room was silent. Then it was not. The applause started at the foundation's table and moved through the ballroom the way things moved when they were true. Not suddenly, but inevitably, the way a tide came in. She heard it build and stayed still at the podium until it reached its height, and then she thanked them and stepped back from the microphone. And as she walked from the stage, she allowed herself to look, briefly, at the front left table. Randall Pemberton Cross was clapping. He was doing it with the particular mechanical quality of a man who understood that not clapping was worse than clapping, and whose hands were moving while his face worked through something complicated and private. His wife was clapping too, and her face had gone the careful, neutral expression of someone who had decided not to have a feeling about this publicly. Abina did not stop. She walked back to her seat and thanked the MC and accepted Constance's hand across the table. Both hands, a real grip, the grip of a woman who meant it. That, Constance said, and did not finish the sentence because she did not need to. What happened after the keynote was not dramatic in the way that people told stories about things being dramatic. It was quieter than that, and longer, and in some ways more final. The gala ran for another hour. There were more speeches, a dessert course, the presentation of the Foundation's annual award, to a teacher from Timmins who had, in 12 years of work, put a library's worth of books into a school that had arrived with none. The room was warm, with the particular warmth of people who had given money and felt good about it, and were now leaning into that feeling. Abina was speaking with the senator when she saw Randall Pemberton Cross approaching. He came from the left side of the room, moving through the crowd with the deliberate pace of a man who had decided to do something and was now doing it before the decision could be reconsidered. His wife was not with him. He was alone, which was either a good sign or a complicated one. He stopped a few feet from her. The senator, reading the situation with the instinct of someone who had spent 30 years in rooms full of charged air, excused himself with the smoothness of a practiced exit. "Mrs. Darko Williams," Randall Pemberton Cross said. "Mr. Pemberton Cross," she said. He was quiet for a moment. She waited. "Your address was exceptional," he said. "The room felt it." "Thank you," she said. Another pause. He was, she could see, a man who was not accustomed to arriving at a conversation without knowing exactly how it would go. He had the bearing of someone for whom most conversations had been arranged in advance, the outcome understood before the words were spoken. "I owe you an apology," he said. "What I said at the reception." He paused. "It was indefensible, and I want you to know that I'm aware of that." Abina looked at him. She thought about what her mother had told her at 11, and about what she had learned at 26, and about the particular weight of the last 48 hours and everything in them. The registration desk, the woman who had not looked up, the ballroom full of people who had now heard her name and her story in a way that could not be undone. She thought about what she wanted to say, and then she said something slightly different, because she had also learned that what she wanted to say and what needed to be said were sometimes the same thing, but not always. "I appreciate you saying that," she said, "and I want to be honest with you because I think you can handle it." He waited. "An apology for behavior like that isn't really about me accepting it," she said. "It's about what you do with the understanding afterward. The apology is the beginning of something. It's not the end of it." He was quiet for a moment. Something moved through his expression. Not something exactly, but something adjacent to it. Something more uncomfortable than the performance of regret. "That's fair," he said. "The Foundation could use board members who take its work seriously," she said. "Not donors who write checks once a year and consider the obligation discharged, who members who read the reports, who know which schools are in the program, who understand what 65 children per classroom actually means for a teacher trying to do literacy intervention." She paused. "If you want to do something with this conversation, that's where I'd start." He looked at her for a long moment. "You're not what I expected," he said, and then seemed to hear how that sounded, and looked away briefly. "No," Abina said. "I rarely am." She called her mother that night from the penthouse suite, standing at the window with the lights of the city below her and the lake beyond that, dark and wide and indifferent to everything happening at its edges. Her mother answered on the third ring, which was always how it went. Her mother did not rush to phones, believing that anything worth talking about could wait 10 seconds. "How was it?" her mother asked. "Good," Abena said. "It was good." "You're using your quiet voice," her mother said. "That means something happened." Abena smiled at the window. A man at the reception made a comment. Assumed I didn't belong. A pause. What did you do? I told him who I was, and then? And then I gave a speech. And then he apologized. And then I told him what the apology was actually worth. Her mother was quiet for a moment. In the background, Abina could hear the television. Her mother watched the evening news every night at 10 and had done so for as long as Abina could remember, because she believed in knowing what was happening in the world even when the world was difficult. Good, her mother said. That's right. I thought about what you told me, Abina said. When I was 11, about knowing what you are and not requiring their agreement. Her mother was quiet again. Then, you remember everything. You told me a lot of important things, Abina said. I told you the things I needed someone to tell me, her mother said. That's all. They talked for a while longer, about small things, the way conversations with mothers could turn from large things to small ones, without anyone deciding to turn them. Her mother's neighbor had a new dog. The mangoes at the market were finally good. The weather in Brampton was starting to change. When they said goodnight, Abina stayed at the window for a long time. Below her, the city moved with the quiet energy of a Thursday night becoming a Friday morning. Lights cycling through intersections, the occasional distant sound of the city being itself. She could see the lake from here, the far edge of it fading into the dark. She thought about Constance and 22 years of work done without enough resources. She thought about the teacher from Timmins, who had shown up in a room full of people in expensive clothes and received a standing ovation for bringing books to children. She thought about Marcus, who had sent pink peonies before she asked. She thought about her mother, who had studied mornings and worked nights and read to her daughter every evening in between, because she believed that access to language was access to everything else. She thought about Randall Pemberton Cross and about the expression on his face when she had told him what the apology was actually worth, whether he would do anything with it, whether he would show up to the foundation's board, read the reports, learn the names of the schools. She did not know. She did not require certainty about that. Some things you said because they needed to be said, and then you let go of the outcome. Her grandmother's ring caught the light as she shifted her hand on the window glass. She had named the plane after her grandmother because her grandmother had never flown, had never left the region of Ghana where she was born, had lived her entire life within a radius of 40 kilometers, and had still managed to understand, with a clarity that Abena had spent her whole adult life trying to match, that the size of a life was not determined by the size of its geography. Water is the oldest listener, her grandmother had said. It has heard everything and forgotten nothing. The lake below did not move from where she was standing. It was too far, too dark, too vast for motion to be visible at this distance. But she knew it was there, the way she knew certain other things. The $40,000 in 2009, the 17 rejections, her mother's shoes by the door, the apartment in Brampton, the ring on her hand. She let the window hold her weight for a moment. Then she stepped back, set down her water glass, and went to sleep.